Hi, Miss Phillips here, and we're going to be doing another landscape painting and kind of get a feel for the process of doing landscape paintings. So you're going to need your materials, you're going to need your brushes, and again, I believe these were the brushes that were sent home with you. If you have any other brushes that you'd like to supplement, feel free. The more brushes, the better. You're going to need some water. You're going to need some sort of paper towel for wiping off your brushes, and you're going to need your acrylic paint and a sheet of your Bristol board. So I'm going to be working on the 9x12 Bristol board for this sample painting. So if you want to get those materials, and then we'll get started. So I hope you all have your materials. Now, in this video, I'm going to paint in real time, but you can stop it or start the tape anytime you need to. Feel free. Now, we're going to paint edge to edge on our board. So again, if you do not have a easily wipeable surface, you might want to throw some paper towel or newspaper or something down to protect. So I'm working on a wood surface here, so I'm going to put a little paper towel down because it just makes it easier. And you're going to be wanting to paint on something flat since we're working on our Bristol board. Now, if you have your own canvas and you want to do this on canvas, you certainly can. You can follow all the steps. Now, this time, we're going to change our format. We're going to be working in a horizontal format. So turn your board so that it's wider than it is tall. And we're going to start the process of painting just like we did in our first practice one. And we're going to mix up a sky color. Because remember, in a landscape painting, we always start with the top and work our way down, and we're working back to front. So I'm just going to use a little piece of foil here to mix my paint on. Works for this. You can use your plastic palettes, whatever wood surface you have. All right, so we're going to start off. We're going to mix the sky color. So I'm going to take a little white, take a little blue, and I'm going to mix those together. And I'm going to use my foil. You could use your palette. And I'm going to take my larger brush here. And again, mix up more paint than you think you're going to need on this, especially on this first portion. Okay. It's going to be a sunny day, so I want a nice light blue. Now, when you're taking paint out of your cup, if you're not disciplined enough to clean your brush every time, and I admit I'm not. I mean, I should. That is the better way to do it. But since I know I'm not, I take the color from the edge. So as I contaminate it, I don't contaminate it too much. So the right way is to clean your brush in between getting your colors. But if you're like me, and that's not always going to happen, get in the habit of taking your paint from the edge. Okay, little trick there. All right, so now I've got a nice lighter blue. I'm going to keep the darker blue down here too. Let's start with this lighter blue. And because I want so much on my board, I'm not even going to bother to clean my brush or take the overload of paint off my brush like I normally would do after mixing, because I'm going to need a lot of paint. And again, I'm going to start at the top of the board. See if I've got that on. I'm going to move this over here to get a little better view. Okay. There's the top of my board, and I'm just going to start painting the entire board blue. And again, side to side, sweeping strokes. When my paint begins to feather, okay, that's called feathering. It's time to get a little bit more on my brush. Now we're going to paint a beach scene here. In fact, we're going to be painting La Jolla Cove here in San Diego. And I just want to cover my board. I'm basically toning my board. Big shapes come first, and detail comes last when painting a landscape. And just side to side, big sweeping strokes. And I want to go down about halfway with my blue color which is going to be my sky. Okay, now I'm going to take a darker blue and go down the rest of the board. So this is where I'm going to take a little bit of that darker blue that I left. And I'm going to continue down the board. Same thing, side to side. Now again, this might be a stage where your board buckles just a little bit because of the amount of moisture in the paint, because you're putting quite a bit of paint on. Now, it's going to be kind of thinned here, but still putting a lot of paint on at one time. And again, don't worry about that, because when the painting is completed, you won't even notice that. Now, I'm not going to do the rest of this. Okay, I could, but I know that this is going to be where there's some land, so I'm going to do this I'm going to tone this with a different color. So right now I'm going to stop with my blues here. Now I am going to clean my brush. I want to get all the blue out. And this is still damp enough that I'm going to start painting my clouds. We're going to paint some different clouds in this one. So again, they're going to be kind of cirrus clouds, but a little different wind pattern. So I'm going to come along here. This is my horizon line now. And I want to judge where I want it. And right now, you know what? I think mine is too much in the middle. I just think it's good to not have your horizon line right in the middle. So I'm going to move the darker color up just a little bit on mine, just past middle. So this is going to be my horizon line where the sky and the ocean meet. So I'm going to bring this blue up. And again, I'm just going side to side. Now, if it's a slightly different blue than here, that's actually good, because as we paint the water, we're going to put lots of different blues and greens in it. Right now, there we go. And you want to keep your horizon line pretty even. You don't want it angling up or anything. Okay. So now I'm going to come to where the horizon line is, where the ocean and the sky meet, and I'm going to start putting some clouds. And I'm just going to kind of tap some in right here at the horizon line. Okay, so I've got one brush load of white, and I'm using my bigger brush. I'm just going to start tapping in. A lot of times when you're painting an ocean scene, you're going to see that there's a lot of clouds. They kind of gather right at the horizon line. So I'm just going to put some white in there. Okay. And I'm going to have a couple kind of up in this area. And again, I'm just kind of tapping, kind of shaking my wrist a little bit. Because clouds are thin in places and they're thick in places. And the beauty of painting clouds is they're always changing and they're always different. No two clouds are exactly the same. Okay. And I think I'll put a couple over here. So you can kind of play with your clouds. I'm just kind of giving you an indication of how to do clouds, but you can put your clouds, you can make your clouds different than mine and put them in different places. I always think that painting clouds is kind of fun. Okay. Now I'm going to clean my brush off, and we're just going to pretend the brush is the wind, and we're just going to kind of come in and blend and sweep. Again, I'm kind of using that circular motion. If you think your paint has been drying out and it's not blending easily, just dampen your brush with just a little bit of water. Don't get it soaking or dripping, just a little bit of water, and that will help the blending process. So again, it's just slightly damp. Then you can pull some extra paint off of your brush as you're doing this. But as we're doing these paintings, what I want you to understand is the first thing you're going to paint is your sky. You're going to kind of establish where your horizon line is, and then come back and do things like clouds. Okay, I'm going to have my wind kind of sweeping in here. A lot of times at the beach, you see the wind almost like sweeps up. We get a little of that sweeping action going. Now we're going to paint a sunny day on this one. But when you choose to do your own landscape, you could be doing a sunset or a sunrise. And I will put out videos on how to do that. Basically, you're going to start the same way, but you'll decide where the sun is in that sunrise or sunset. Here in California, the sun sets over the ocean. And then your sky is going to also pick up colors of oranges and pinks and reds. So I will do a separate video on painting a sunset. Okay. But you can see, I'm playing with my clouds. Now I could continue to play with them. You decide when your clouds are looking right. For the sake of time, I am going to move on now from my clouds. I say that, but then I don't want to. I want to keep painting. So after we've done that little bit of sky, we're going to come and start playing with our ocean. Now, for your ocean, you're going to be using your blues. You want to have some green available. You can either mix up your own green with your yellow and blue. You can use the green that was provided. I like to use a mixture of them. So I'm going to take a second here, and there's my green. I'm going to mix up my own green here. Use my palette. Okay, so I'm going to need a little yellow. And a little blue. Okay, so I'm mixing up a green. I want it to be kind of a blue-green, so I'm going to put a little more blue into it. Working with that tertiary color of blue-green. So I got a nice, deep blue-green. Hope the camera can pick that up. Okay. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to start with my blue-green going on in here. Now I'm going to be layering a lot of different colors. So I just want a little bit of green in there, a little blue-green. I'll take a little blue. I just added a little white to my blue-green. Okay. Now, I'm not going to leave this because, you know, the ocean is not green, but I do want to get some greens in there. So, think of the different colors you see at the beach when you go. Okay, we're going to be doing La Jolla Cove, and so I'm going to put a little green right in here. Okay, now I'm going to take my greens and I'm going to finish off my board in my green. And I'm just going to place it. And I'm just toning my board. This is not going to end up being green, but it's just a background color to finish toning the board here. And I want it to go up over where my water is. Okay, so now I'm going to come back and start putting some blues back over my greens there. So I'm going to mix up color just a little bit darker than my sky color. And I'm going to start putting that in. And again, on the ocean, I'm going side to side because I want the ocean to appear flat. The movement is going to come from the different blues and greens in there, but not from my brush strokes. Brush strokes are going to be nice and flat. Now I'm going to keep mixing up colors, and I like to not have the same color, so I only mix up a little bit at a time because I want a variety of blues here in my ocean. Darker blue in there too. Usually a little darker blue towards the horizon line. Now when you're painting an ocean, your ocean reflects your sky. So if you've got a stormy gray tone sky, then your ocean has to be in those same stormy gray tones. You would never have a beautiful blue, aqua kind of ocean and dark storm skies, because the ocean reflects what's going on in the sky above it. So I'm going to take a little of my sky blue now, and I'm going to layer some of that sky blue into my water. And again, there's no rules to this. You just kind of have to play with it, see what you like. That, I think, is the fun part about a painting, is no matter how many times I've painted, even the same subject, every time you paint, it's a different painting. It takes you on a different path or a different adventure. Okay, so we're going to do La Jolla Cove for this one. I just want to show you how to bring some land going out around it. We could actually turn this into a beach scene and just leave it as it is, but we're going to add a little land curving in this direction. So I'm going to need a color for my land. Let's see, I'm just going to take a little, and I'm going to mix up kind of a light brownish color. So I need to get a neutral. You might possibly have some brown. If you have some brown, use it. If you don't, and I'll show you different ways to make brown, complementary colors with a little black and a little white can do it with our paints. So let's see, I'm going to take, since I'm working with blue, I'll put a little red and make a little violet. Excuse me, we'll make a little orange. We'll put it into our blue. Okay, so I'm going to take a little red and a little yellow. And mix a nice little orange. I'll put that into my blue. And you can see I'm beginning to get a little bit of a greeny brown. I'm going to put a little black into that. And then I'm going to add a little white. Okay, so I'm beginning to get a little kind of light brown taupey color. That's the color I'm going to use. So again, I use complementary colors, a little black and a little white. Okay, so now we're going to start our beach scene. So what I want you to do is we're going to come along here. You can switch brushes if you feel more comfortable. You can go to a smaller brush at this point. Basically what I want to do is I want to come along and establish where that cliff line is. It's going to be above my horizon line. Okay, and then it's going to come down, kind of out into the water a little bit. Okay, and then we're going to curve it around. Like this is going to be the base. Right here, I'm going to establish the base of, this is where the cove curves around to. You'll notice I'm not drawing with, I didn't draw this at all. I want you to feel comfortable when you're doing a landscape painting to just kind of let your brush do the drawing for you. I'm going to come along and this is going to curve back like this. We're going to curve around like here. So here's my cove. Okay. Now this part is going to be my beach is going to be right in here. So I'm going to take a little of this color I'm working with. I'm going to add a little more white to it. And I'm just going to establish my beach. Now, side to side here, because my beach is going to be flat. It's going to come around. Okay. Now it might take a couple coats or a couple layers because you're going over the blue. And right now this is kind of, I'm not doing any detail. I'm just establishing for myself where things are. So I've got a cove. Now this is the vertical part of the cove, so I'm going to switch my brush strokes, and instead of side to side, I'm going to go vertically, and I'm going to make some little choppy vertical strokes in here. It's amazing how our brains work, how when you start going vertical, the brain starts seeing things as going up. Okay, I'm going to come along here and just kind of establish that this is the cliff portion. Now there's going to be a top to this and everything, but first I want to get my verticals going. Okay, and I'm going to bring some of this color and begin to layer it and mix it in here with my green, because this is my cove coming around. And again, this is going to get layered over, so I'm just establishing the composition at this point. Okay. Now, you'll have, if you notice, you've got a photocopy of what I'm using to kind of just establish this image. I'm not making it exactly the same because I'm giving myself some license to play with things, but you'll have that. You can look at it as you're doing your painting. Okay, so now on my cove, I'm going to come around and establish, there's a couple little islands or little rock outcrops that kind of come around in here. One over in here. Okay, so I'm going to start playing and establishing what my cove looks like. I'm not going to put in all the details of buildings and stuff, but I'm going to get kind of the rock outcropping. So, okay, so I'm making this a little bit lighter along in here. So I'm going to have playing around with darks and lights of my browns. I want to establish on this side some lights. And again, I'm going vertical here because I want to make it look like it's going up. But as we're doing this practice one, what I really want you to understand is as you choose a landscape, and whatever you choose for your actual project next week, they all start the same way. We're going to start with the sky and the ground and kind of get the major part out. We work back to front. We work big shapes to detail. So I have my big shapes of the sky and the ocean. So now I'm going to start working a little bit. I've established my big shape of where the land is. So now I'm going to start playing with the detail. And the detail in this painting would be like the sides of the cliffs. Where the dark areas are on the cliff. So if I'm looking right here, there's a little dark. And I'm going to put a little dark area around here. And these are kind of first layers because you'll notice as you do this, your paint is a little bit, what's the word I'm looking for? It might be a little bit watery in places. See, I'm picking up a little bit of water right here. So I'm going to come back to that. I want to establish that there is a top layer, so I'm going to flatten it out right here. I'm going to go horizontal with my strokes because I want to create a flat top to the cove. And I'm going to bring that flat top around here. So you can see the flat part is flattening out and the vertical parts are giving me the height of the cove. Okay, and then I want to bring a little bit down in here, but I'm going to make that a little bit darker because that's what I'm seeing. See a little bit of a shadow right in here. So anything that's vertical, I'm doing vertical strokes. Anything that appears horizontal, I'm changing the direction of my strokes. Okay, I'm going to take a little of that dark now and come over other places where I'm seeing a little bit of a dark edge to things. Now I saved this one for as your second one because there's a little more detail to play around with in this painting. But again, I'm establishing verticals and horizontals, and I think you can begin to see it is beginning to look a little more like the cove. Come in here, put a little texture in there. And then anytime you want a little texture, just kind of shake your hand a little bit. That's going to give you a little scumbling, which will give you some textures. I want to give a little vertical thrust to that, so I'm going to go up and down. Okay, now let's see. I think this might be dry enough now. No, it's still a little wet. Sometimes you get a little wet spot where the paint was just a little thicker. It might take a few more minutes to let that dry as you play with it. So I'm going to come back to that. There's some green at the top of my cove, so I'm going to put a little green. I'm going to put it into my brown a little bit because I don't want it to be too green. And I'm going to come along and I'm going to give some indication of foliage or grass or ground. So I'm just going to do a little pouncing, a little patting here. See, that didn't turn out green enough, so I'm going to put a little more green on my brush. And along the top, I can see a little bit of that green. And I'm going to bring a little of that green over into this area over here. And I'm going to make it a little more yellow-green when it gets there. Okay, and I had to clean my brush there because I was trying to make a yellow-green and it was getting really muddy. Sometimes if you get too many paint colors going at once on your brush, you're just going to make mud. Okay. Okay. But it's good to know how to make mud because sometimes we want that if we're doing, looking to try and make a brown. Okay, so I'm going to come along and I'm going to put a little bit of screen green right here at the top of this one. I'm going to put a little bit of that along the edge here. And again, your cove is going to look different than mine. And that is the beauty of art. We don't want everything to look the same. Everybody's interpretations of things will be slightly different. I'm going to bring a little of that right in here. Okay, I'm kind of painting La Jolla Cove, I think, back beginning of last century, before it got all built up. Okay, I'm gonna come in and we'll do some more cliff action here. You can work it any way you want. I'm just playing around with the detail of my cove. Okay, I'm gonna put a second layer on my sand, and I notice in my picture my sand actually comes back up in here, so I'm going to put a little bit of that in here. And again, on the beach, I'm keeping it side to side because I want to flatten it. Bring it right up to where the cliff is. Go back in there a little bit. Okay. I think I'm going to make it just a little bit darker here to kind of show like a little shadow on the cliff, or a little shadow from the cliff. Now I'm working with local color, which means I'm painting colors that the eye actually perceives. But as a painter, we don't have to work with just local color. In fact, I'm going to put a little pink into my sand. Sand wouldn't be pink in reality, but I like to play with color, and I'm going to encourage you, if you feel the need or you would like to, play with color. You do not have to paint these in local color. You can paint them in any color you'd like. What I'm trying to establish as you do a landscape painting is the process of how you do it. Right? That you're working large to small, detail. Like I'm playing with detail now because I'm halfway through my painting. Yeah, I like a little pink in there. But that's just me. I'm going to put a little right along this edge here. So again, you can play with colors that are not the local color of things. Now, to establish the actual beach and where the water and the sand meet, what I'm going to do, I already have some nice green going in there, but I think I'm going to move my green a little closer. So I'm going to put a little green here. And if you look at your photo reference, there are some nice greens in the water where the water gets shallower. And then I'm going to come along with a little light blue. Okay, and I'm going to come along and little light blue, like right along here. So we're going to kind of make it look like the waves are kind of going up onto things. I'm going to come along with a little light blue and just kind of establish the movement of the water. So I'm doing a very thin line here. I'm using the tip of my brush, of my number 6 brush. You could use a smaller brush if you want. Basically, I want to bring a little of that light blue up and over my sand and pull it back into the water. And I don't want it to be an even line because the water is always moving. Okay, I'm going to take a little darker blue, still light blue, but I'm gonna go a little bit darker than I just had it. And kind of, I'm going back and forth, just kind of playing with that. Just kind of establishing that the water's kind of moving around a little bit. I'm going to put a little darker blue, kind of like a little edge to it. I just don't want to make it too noticeable. I want the brain to kind of pick up on it without going, wow, what's going on there? You know, it's like you want to be subtle. Just basically kind of giving some movement to the water. Now you could take some of your more established, maybe your pure blue, and we can do a little bit of that. Yeah, with the very tip of your brush. Could do like a little rippling of the water moving. If you get too much, and I think I did on that first one, then this is the beauty of paint. Just come along, blend it away. So I just kind of want to establish a little movement without making it look too much like just lines. So I find blending always works nice. Put the line down and then blend side to side a little bit. So the line is there establishing that the water's coming in, but not too much what's the word, noticeable. So keep it subtle. Okay. So I'm establishing my water moving in. I think I'm going to leave that for a minute and go back to that spot over there. Put another coat. See, it's a lot brighter on this next coat. Leave some of that dark in there. Maybe I'm just going to put like a little ridge around here. Yeah, because that makes it look like two different little sections of my cove. I'm going to come along, put a little light right on the top of this little rock. And a little bit over in here. And let's see, I'm gonna put a little bit. Okay, so I can just start playing with different levels of lights and darks inside my cove. The main thing is I want to establish vertical for the height of the cove and horizontal for the top of the cove. And you notice there's some lights over in here. Just going to start establishing those. Okay. All right, and basically I would continue to play with this. Let's see, I want a little dark. Right in here. And you can turn off the tape and play with your cliffs and cove on the cove until you get to where you like it. I think there's a little bit. I want to show a little bit of a dark in here. But this is a practice one, so you don't have to overfuss too much. But you know, it's something you can keep. It's going to be a beautiful painting. So so you can continue to play with it. see. After you get your cove the way you want it, the next step would be to add the last little details. There's some palm trees, as you can see in the painting. And for the palm trees, I'm just going to take a thin line. And I'm just going to establish some of the trunks of my palm trees. They're kind of in little clusters. You don't have to paint exactly how many you see. And then to do the palm tree itself, don't try and do every branch or everything because we don't really see that. What we really see is just a group of leaves. So you're just going to kind of pat them in. I'm going to pat a little more foliage down in here. Now, one of the things you can do to kind of set off your palm trees is put a little light on them. So take a little warm white, so just a lot of white with a tiny bit of yellow in it, and just kind of give them a little light side where the light's hitting the couple palm fronds. Okay, it doesn't take much. A little dabs. So a little light. You could play around with a little dark too. See if you like that. But you'll notice I'm not trying to paint anything individualized. I'm just kind of giving an indication. And that's kind of what we're going to be doing. In the last part, we're going to come down here and we're going to paint some flowers, because there's beautiful marguerite daisies that grow along the cove. And so what I'm going to have you do is take your big brush and if you've got an old painter's brush, you know, a really cheap old stiff one, this works great for that. And usually in the classroom I have those for you, but this year I wasn't able to do it, so I'm going to show you another way to do this. We're going to take some greens, and I want you to kind of pounce and I'm just using just regular green here right out of the bottle here, and we're going to pounce in some texture. And I'm going to let it come right up over the clip there. And I'm going to continue that with some yellows. And it's just a little bit of a yellow green. And again, I'm pouncing. So pouncing, I'm just taking my big brush and I'm shaking my hand up and down, touching and lifting, touching and lifting. I want to get a whole bunch of different textures in there. The more texture, the more real it'll look. I want to go above. I've got too much of an even line on mine, so I'm going to go up with some of them. Okay. I'm going to put some dark greens in there, so I'm going to mix a little green and black together. Basically, the more we do this, the more natural it's going to look. I think that's one of the tricks to painting landscapes, is you're just making shapes that indicate things, and you're letting your viewer's brain do all the work for you. Now, I think this is a little dark, but I'm going to keep it because I kind of like what's happening there. So this is a really dark green I'm throwing in. A little bit over somewhere else, maybe down in here. And again, I kind of like things that aren't quite local colors, so I'm going to throw some pink in here too. Yeah, I don't want it to be too pink, so I'm going to throw some green over that. But basically, I am layering colors until I get the effect I want. But see, just throwing that little pink in there gives the eye something else to look at. So establishing different colors. Maybe I'm going to throw a little yellow in there. Yellow is such a transparent color that when you use it, it does, you know, you have to put a few layers in there sometimes. But that's just going to kind of warm it up down here. Now, Marguerite daisies are generally white, so I'm going to throw some white in here now. Just going to pounce it in to look like my flowers. I'm going to take the corner of my brush and I'm going to start bouncing. So I'm going to say there's a group of my flowers. I want a little group over here. I'm going to put a little group over in here. Notice I'm not trying to paint actual flowers. I'm just putting little dots of paint, and people are going to perceive it as flowers. If you get something that you don't like, take your brush and blend it out. Okay, so how that softened it? You can always throw a little bit of green, one of your greens that you use, back on to kind of fade things away. So don't overthink it, just kind of have some fun with it. And that's kind of the thing I would say for all painting. Don't overthink it, have some fun. Remember, it's just paint. You have control. If you don't like something, you play with it. You blend it, you move it. And I think one of the biggest problems we have when we first start painting is we think we have to paint all this detail to make things look real, when it's actually the opposite. The less detail, the more real it's going to look to your viewers. Now, the last thing I'm going to show you on this video is how we can kind of just establish our beach line in here. So you can come in with a very thin brush or the very tip of your brush. You can put like a little broken line of white right where the waves are coming in. You don't want to make it a pure outline. It should be a broken line. But what that will do is that kind of gives you that foam line where the water comes in. You can put like a little foam line further up on your beach. And again, if you think you get too much, you blend it away. Okay. And then the rest of this painting is all about just looking at your reference, deciding what you want to put in, where the detail's going to go. I'm going to put a little edge of white along here because I want to make it look like it's splashing up onto these rocks. I see, I think I got too much there, so I'm going to blend it away. Okay, so that's painting a beach scene. You're going to, again, start with your sky, establish where your horizon line is, go down with your water as far as you think you should before your ground is going to start. Build up any ground, then come back and start playing with the details that you see in your reference or in your mind's eye. So right now, I'm just playing with my painting. I'm just playing with the details. Kind of showing you what I need to show you, but as a painter, as an artist, I kind of like to have a paintbrush in my hand, so I'm going to continue to play a little bit. I noticed that some of my details are not exactly as I saw them in the picture. Mainly because it did not have my glasses on. But I'm okay with that. I don't know how you are or what your philosophy is as an artist, but I always feel that art stands alone. And this is my interpretation and not necessarily a totally 100% accurate depiction. I feel if you want that, you know, we have cameras. Now I am going to go back and put a little more of the detail that I see now that I have my glasses on. And I'm just going to paint a little more. And I'm just doing the same techniques that I was showing you for the foliage up here. I'm just kind of pouncing away. Going to add a few more trees. Little things that you can do as you play. Like on this one, I notice there's a shadow in here, so I'm going to mix up a little dark brown. I'm going to put a little blue in it because I like to play with color, and I'm going to bring a little bit of a shadow here. Ooh, too much water on my brush. Just going to pull that up. And again, even in this little area, I want to keep my strokes vertical because I want to show that this is a cliff back here. But I kind of like that edge that creates with that cliff there. And I think I'm going to bring this cliff back a little more. Now, it's not necessarily like that in the cove, but I think for my painting, it's going to look a little better if I do that. And again, these are things I can't teach you. These are things you have to kind of feel. But you guys are artists, and you have that sensibility. I'm going to put a little white edge or a little lighter edge on that. So I'm going to establish there's a second cliff right here. So if I put a little white, or not pure white, just a little whiter, little tint of that color there. See how it pulls this one forward and pushes that one back? And I'm going to slant it a little bit, so I'm going to move it a little bit this way. Okay. So I'm just playing with my cliffs now. I'm just going to play around with the flowers and just, again, just adding detail. And the detail, those little fussy things, the things that, I don't know about you, but the things that I like to do as an artist, the little fussy edges and things like that, that comes at the very, very, very end of a landscape painting. And that's what I want you to be aware of, is that process of how you do it. That it's back to front, top to bottom, big shapes, detail. Detail comes last. And I don't know about you, but as a painter, detail's one of the things I love the most. So I am going to turn off the video because I could sit here and paint for another hour just playing with the detail. So I won't make you guys watch that. But I hope you have fun with this second landscape painting. And again, every painting is its own adventure. Every painting is going to be what it wants to be. Don't overfuss with it. When you think something looks good, step away from it. That's one of the guidelines I can give you that sometimes I have a hard time following. And a lot of artists do. So when you think it's good, step away. You can always come back and paint later, but you don't want to overwork it. Okay, so can't wait to see your version of La Jolla Cove, and then I can't wait to see what you choose for your landscape. And again, it could be any scene, whether it's an ocean scene, whether it's a desert scene, whether it's a mountain scene, you're going to paint it, or jungle scene, you're going to paint it the same way. Okay? So have fun.